Welcome to another episode of Speciality Sessions with me, your host, Natasha Klimchuk. Today, I'm joined on the podcast by Chris Brown, Vice President of ESG at Synthomer. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks, Natasha. Glad to be here.
So, Chris, for anyone that doesn't know you and doesn't know Synthomer, would you mind telling us a little bit more about you, your background, and the business?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Chris. I'm the guy who was born in Salford, so I'm a proud northerner from northwest of the UK. I'm a chemical engineer by training, but probably many decades of not having actually practiced that. I've undertaken sustainability roles across a wide range of sectors: chemical waste management, steel, back when UK had a steel industry, automotive with Toyota, energy with E.ON, food and agriculture with Singaporean company Olam and Associated British Foods. Now VP for ESG at Synthomer, who are a world-leading supplier of high-performance polymers. So we specialize in ingredients for key sectors like coatings, construction, adhesives, health and protection. We're headquartered in London, employ just under 4,000 people, and innovation and sustainability, integral enablers for our business strategy. So my real challenge is making sure that I keep integrated, sustainability in that business strategy and focus on the priorities to support the delivery of said business strategy.
And when you first started your career, obviously you studied chemical engineering, but obviously didn't end up working directly in the chemical industry, right? Did you ever end up that you would eventually come full circle into the sector?
No, I was just reflecting on sort of early career a few days ago and thinking when I started, I really didn't have much of a clue what I wanted to do. But I undertook a industrial placement as part of my degree, a big, huge industrial chemical plant making phosphoric acid. And I had a great time. But when I finished that, I thought, I don't really want to spend the rest of my life working at a site like that. I thought there might be more interesting things to do.
Mm.
I also come from a background where people didn't have professional careers. So I really didn't know anybody who had professional careers. People I grew up with had jobs. So I had no real point of reference. So I was sort of making it up as I went along. But I did see a job role just as I was finishing at university for an environment engineer. I thought that sounds interesting. It's something I can take my chemical engineering to, but it's also a field that feels like it's going to evolve and grow. So I knew what I didn't want to do, found something that I did, and then over time, I think I started to realize actually what the chemical sector was actually about. It's about the use of chemistry to drive change. And I just didn't realize that for many, many years. But slowly, you start to realize what a strong, incredible enabler the chemical sector is. And as I started to understand that, then that pathway back into the chemical sector started to look much more attractive. If it was just industrial manufacturing, that wasn't interesting to me. But how we can enable change for the better, that definitely is of interest.
Out of interest, what was your perception of the chemical industry before joining it? I think the general public, you say, and I'm referring back actually to David Dukes' episode, which is episode 1, you say chemicals and people go, oh, you say chemistry and people think it sounds, it's a kind of gentler kind of explanation for the sector, right? So what was your perception?
I think it was very much that. It was, I didn't understand, apart from making chemicals that did things. So detergents, as an example, is probably the best one that people might think of. It's what do chemicals actually do? So they might clean things, they might stick a few things together. But when I was starting, the world of adhesives was fairly linear as well. The things that we're doing at Synthomer are very different. So it was a industrial, it was dirty. It didn't feel like there was a great deal of innovation. And I didn't really understand how it might help us get to a more modern world. It was churning out things that we just needed on a daily basis. It was, okay, how is this going to drive change? How is this going to help us create that future world that we're looking for? And again, drive the change across the world to make people's lives better. So again, it was just a lack of understanding. And I guess if you're just somebody outside of the sector, just a person in public, it does have a challenge trying to understand what the chemical sector actually does.
I agree with you on that, because I think it's a general consensus of people inside the industry that there's maybe a bit of a branding issue with the sector. But why do you think that the message that we all talk about isn't landing widely enough with the general public?
So I think we're so programmed to look at the end product. So I'm looking at a screen today. I'm sitting at a table with a laminated surface. You look at the end product, and we're not really programmed to ask questions about what goes into making that product the way it is. Marketing is very much about the end product. It's not about how you've got there. But the more interesting story is actually what sits behind the product. What are all these amazing elements that have gone into making something the way it is? People might look at a skyscraper and ignore the fact that it's, how are we actually painting that structure? How have we actually made the concrete, the cement, the glass, everything that goes into that structure? A car, all of those elements that go into making a car, and the role of chemistry in that. Chocolate bar, and it's chemistry in chocolate bars. Well, it's fertilizers. So how can you have better fertilizers that help reduce costs for smallholder cocoa farmers in West Africa and give them higher productivity? So it's how do you tell the enabling story of chemistry rather than talking about an industry? So I think definitely there's huge opportunity to tell a much more interesting story, and especially for the next generation coming through. Look at how exciting this sector is. Look at the possibilities it has for the future. And why wouldn't you want to be part of this? Because you could go into any other sector then, being able to understand how the chemistry then works and to drive innovation, drive change, improve the business model, the business case, and ultimately deliver those outcomes, those sustainability outcomes at the end of the day. So I think it feels like a marketeer's dream looking at it now, comparing the chemical industry versus the chemistry sector. Marketing's focused on how does something make you feel. It doesn't make you ask, or most marketing, it doesn't make you ask the questions about how did that product come to be, because it's that's
not sexy,
could be complicated. It's not sexy. No, I think that's it's how do you make the message simple? But for the chemistry sector, being able to describe us as a sector that affects change and show all these great innovations that just wouldn't exist is, I think there's a huge amount that we could be doing better to really attract and retain future generations to come into this industry. Which my experience when I was a young engineer was it's dirty. It's probably not for me. I'd rather go into something a bit more fast moving, a bit more interesting.
Sure.
But I think, for me, it's one of those sectors that underpins everything. And I've been in meetings at the end of last year with the UK government on the UK industrial strategy. And there's a realization that chemistry underpins everything. And without the chemistry sector, then those industries that government, both UK or China or the USA or in the EU, those sectors that they're focusing on for growth won't be able to grow without the chemistry behind them to allow that to happen.
From what you're saying here, everything in modern life depends on chemistry in some way. We've just spoken about that. But what responsibility does that place on chemical companies, especially from a sustainability point of view?
I think from the sustainability point of view, really interesting, because we've got to think about what type of world do we want to live in? So from people, from environment, from economic situation. So we need to think about that, which means you've got to look forward into the future. What should the world look like? Unfortunately, that work's been done. So 2015 UN Sustainable Development Goals, all of the countries in the UN sat down and said, this is what we want the future to look like. And we probably have to do a better job of translating what that means into sectors, into companies. And there's a lot of SDG washing out there, but we've defined what we think the world needs to look like. So it's now about how do we set those 10, 20, 30-year strategies to get there and start to say, what is it we need to allow that to happen? But we do this anyway. We set 10, 20, 30-year strategies because we're making large-scale capital investment in huge infrastructure. So we do this. We know about it. It's just about what's the outcome. So what are the sustainability outcomes that we should be working around? So climate change, recyclability, reducing water, reducing substances of concern, hazardous chemicals. All of these things, again, we know about, but it's about building those into strategies. So those chemical companies that are able to think over those time horizons, build sustainability into the strategy. And Synthomer is one of those companies. Our strategy has 3 enablers: end market orientation, innovation, and sustainability. So this isn't about reporting. It's about how do we use sustainability to define where we need to be in the future and enable us to get there for that business strategy to be a success. If you're not embedding it into your strategy, then it's on the edge of the table. And when times get a bit tighter, as we've seen recently, it's very easy to roll back if it's not fundamental to your business strategy. So this is it now. It's think strategically about where you want to be in 10, 20, 30 years. If people say that's difficult, say you do this all the time, you're making large-scale investments in long-term decisions about innovation to deliver certain outcomes for customers and end markets. So ask yourself, what do those customers and end markets need for sustainability? And it's not that difficult. We should white label the word sustainability and just say, okay, what do the markets and customers need in order for us to be able to deliver what we've already defined as the future world?
And what do you think good looks like in the context of 20 years, 30 years time?
Over 20, 30 years, you should be able to go from linear production systems to circular production systems. I also reflected on about my early career. I realized in my early career in waste management, those were businesses part of the circular economy, but we hadn't invented the word circular economy back then. We should be looking at circular value chains, circular economy. So we're extracting all of the value out of things and minimizing the use of increasingly rare and expensive raw materials, or raw materials that are coming from parts of the world where logistics are incredibly difficult, or human rights is a challenge. So again, it's how do we just apply, in a way, good engineering practice, but it's about being efficient is probably the best way to put it.
And you and I have spoken at length about flipping sustainability from a compliance thing into adding real commercial value. And I know that's something that you feel really strongly about, because ultimately, if it's not got a value to the customer or the consumer or whoever's at the end product, no one's going to buy into the process or the idea or whatever that is. But what does that really look like inside a business? Because I think it's really easy to talk about, less easy to deliver.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It's sustainability. Yeah, you do sustainability, and everyone will suddenly want to change. Well, it's not. It's really about, again, coming back to what actually does that mean for your stakeholders? What are the challenges your stakeholder, your customer? So really understanding your key stakeholders. So if you think about Synthomer, it's about our customers principally. We're a B2B company. So we need to know our customer. We need to, through our customer, understand what their end market looks like today and is going to look like in the future. So it's about building partnerships with those customers, because again, if you're going to innovate and say we're going to define a long-term strategy, change takes time. So you need to be sure that people are going to be with you for that duration of time. But internally, that flipping it into value means if you're going to focus on your stakeholder and those stakeholders are customers, then who owns those relationships today? And the answer is the commercial teams themselves.
Sure.
So you need to be able to involve those commercial teams in the conversation, because at the end of the day, we're a business. We've got to be able to sell that product. And we've got to be able to have the business models that allow us to do that. So we might be able to deliver the most incredible sustainability outcomes.
But it's no good if
But
no one
if
wants to buy it.
nobody can afford to buy it or actually understands what the value of that is, then that's going to be really tricky. So again, it's being able to take people with you. It's allowing people like the commercial teams to be part of the ideation of solutions. It's about working with them to have conversations with customers to say, okay, we're aligned on this. This is the direction we're heading in. These are the outcomes we'll be able to deliver by doing this. This is the benefit to both parties, and this will be the benefit to the end markets as well. So it's really taking a step back from thinking about sustainability as box ticking,
Sure.
to really, how does that change again bring those sustainable outcomes, and how does chemistry in Synthomer's case enable that change to deliver those sustainable outcomes? So again, be that through offering lower carbon products or products that enable recycling of packaging. There's so many examples out there, but it's really saying what's the challenge that customer, that stakeholder really needs to address. Because if you can help somebody solve a problem, then there's value in that for them, and therefore there's value in it for you. But it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. And it means that you've got to put the time and effort in to really work with your commercial teams. These people that have typically gone out and sold services, sold products that have certain attributes. And now we're asking them to say, okay, add sustainability to that list. So you've got to work with them to build their confidence, build their vocabulary, their understanding of what it is we're trying to do and why, and then how to articulate that for the customer as part of value selling.
Properly equipping your commercial teams is how you're going to have success with sustainable innovation. What benefits have you seen? And obviously we're talking about Synthomer. I know Synthomer are really good at doing this, but by having your commercial guys at the coalface with a better level of understanding about sustainable innovation versus those than previous.
Overall, it just builds the customer relationship.
Sure.
It shows that what we're thinking in multiple dimensions of what's the value of the product that we're looking to bring for them. It means we're asking questions about what's the problem or opportunity for the customer. So really, it shows that you care about the customer and their end markets. It's not just about saying we're here to sell a product. It's what's the application, what's the use of that product going to enable you, the customer, to do differently, more effectively, and then recognize that many of our customers are also in the value chain and will then be selling on to somebody else. So it's supporting them with how do they articulate the sustainability benefits of their product to their customers much more effectively as well. But we spent a lot of time working with our commercial teams. We built as part of our Sustainability Academy. We started actually as part of the Sustainability Academy, I should say, by focusing on the commercial teams. It was clear that, and I went out with colleagues and spoke to lots of customers alongside our commercial teams to understand not just what sustainability meant for our customer, but how did our teams understand what sustainability meant to Synthomer and hence to the customer? And it was clear that there was a big gap. There's a big spectrum. There were people that were really clued up on sustainability, able to talk about it. There were others that were clued up, maybe didn't have the confidence to speak about it because they weren't sure really what they should be saying. So it was a huge piece of work to work with commercial teams to help them build their confidence around this. And then within the technical and commercial teams, there are people that have evolved their role and that have taken more responsibility on, because it's much better that the people that are closest to the customer are able to maintain those conversations. You can't always keep coming back to a central sustainability team. We just need to realize that this is just a set of skills, attributes that we need to be able to have as part of that customer offering. And like you say, you can't just keep reverting back to a central sustainability team and say they're the experts on everything. No, you've got to know your product, know your customer, know their end market, and be able to offer those things the same as any other attribute.
I think one of the challenges with any type of innovation is timing and getting the timing right, because I think sometimes you can bring solutions to a market before customers are ready, and then that's a challenge in itself, even though that you know it's a great product or a great technology. If people aren't ready for it, it's dormant until everyone's almost caught up. So how do organizations balance pushing innovation forward while listening to what the market actually needs? Because here's the balance then between the sales guys and the lab guys and how they work together.
Yeah, and it's you. There's risk in being first to market, and there's risk of not moving quickly enough afterwards. So again, it's asking yourself, what sort of company do you want to be? So if you're a fast follower on every other attribute of your products, then arguably why would you change on sustainability? Or if you're a laggard, why would you change? So it's just again asking yourself strategically, looking at your customers, almost doing a customer segmentation, saying how important is sustainability to those customers, whether or not they know it. So what end markets are they in, and what are those drivers of sustainability in those end markets? And then hopefully, again, you segment your customers and you start to say, who are the customers that do care, are doing something, are in that leading group wanting to drive change around this. So that's where you focus your efforts. So again, it's white label sustainability, and just think about how does business affect change and drive innovation. And sustainability is then you just bring that in as an extra layer. But it is a risk if you go and you put time and effort in internally, and you've convinced people to invest time and money, resource into something, and then the business value isn't there, then that's not a great place to be. And there's a couple of points in my career where that's happened, and then it's a bit slower then. The next time you want to do something, people will ask a few more questions, and it's, are you sure this is what the market needs? So again, this is why it's important to have the commercial teams involved. This is why it's really important to be engaging customers, to be involved in trade associations, to be involved in groups. I've been involved in organizations like World Business Council for Sustainable Development in previous roles. Again, getting as much insight as you can to reduce the risk of when you take something to market, it's not going to stick, it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
That's what you've got to do.
Yeah. And in B2B chemical markets especially, in reality, how much control do customers really have over the direction of innovation?
They are, the closer a customer is to the end market, then the higher the influence. So we work with tire companies as an example. So they're very close. That's the end product. It's a tire. There's some great innovation going across the sector, the whole tire sector. Yeah, some really interesting things happening there. They're looking at their challenges and taking ownership of it. So yeah, the closer you are to that end product, then you have much greater say in how that innovation happens. The further up the value chain you are, typically less safe. But then if you're a raw material supplier, a company like Synthomer, you're making a chemical that goes into one of our products, and you could produce that with a significantly lower carbon footprint, or a much better price point for an alternative, like let's say bio or recycled materials, then that becomes interesting. So you can influence across the value chain, but you've got to be building those relationships, and having those conversations. But yeah, if you're one step away from the consumer, you're in a very powerful position.
There's a lot of noise at the moment around the current chemical market environment, certainly at the time that we're recording this. I'm always very conscious of not just talking about how difficult it is, because there are green shoots. So what are you genuinely optimistic about for the future of the sector?
I'm really optimistic about the ambition in Europe. Well, let's say the EU and UK, just separating them out for political expediency. I'm really, and that's ambition. So they're setting the direction. There's other challenges around UK and EU that I won't get into. I'm really optimistic, and this might sound a bit strange to some people, but I'm really optimistic about this latest Chinese 5-year plan. I think take the time to go and read it. And particularly from a sustainability perspective, take the time to read it and look at how this could really be a game changer at scale, not just for the Chinese domestic market, but for what Chinese manufacturing might look to export, and what might the opportunities then be for us to say, this is what we want sustainability to look like in the products that we might be sourcing from China. But the Chinese 5-year plan really is, I think, a huge step in the right direction. And I think also, just going back to the point you made earlier about chemical and chemistry industry, I think that point is starting to come through much more strongly, especially in how we're communicating with our customers and at trade shows. We're communicating about how our products enable change, how the chemistry within our products is enabling change and delivering those outcomes, delivering those more sustainable outcomes. So how it's helping customers use less energy in drying and curing applications, or bringing products to market that don't have certain chemicals in them, like PFAS, as an example, offering lower carbon solutions, offering products that are able to then aid or be recycled in themselves. So I think across the sector, we're doing a better job of speaking about how we enable the delivery of sustainable outcomes as opposed to just the product. There's a long way to go on that, but yeah, I think those are the key things. And if the next generation looks at that, then hopefully they'll start to see this sector as change makers. And really important for, as I said earlier, all of those other sectors that people look at and say, wow, those are exciting sectors. Yes, but without the chemistry behind it, nothing's going to happen.
That exist.
So I think that's key.
And I want to take you back a little bit, something that you mentioned about the Chinese 5-year plan, because I think that's something that's really important to cover off. Why do you think developments there could have such a big ripple effect globally in a positive way?
Yeah, so this latest 5-year plan, and I was in Shanghai in October 24. So in the previous 5-year plan, I met the Association of International Chemical Manufacturers, and they were talking a lot about the future direction. So it's clear that this isn't just a bandwagon they've jumped on. This is long-term strategic planning, because what they're going to do is improve carbon governance internally. They're going to look at product level carbon management. They're going to continue to expand clean energy. So the energy system within China will fundamentally change, which means then the footprint of those products they produce changes. So that will then drive, hopefully, some competition in other parts of the world, in Europe, in UK, for us to do that. Because for so long, we've taken the higher ground in terms of the sustainability credentials of the things that we manufacture. So again, if that competition is coming in, then it forces us to just up the ante on what we want to do. And I've not mentioned the US. There's lots of good things happening in the US as well. But I think that competition will start with the Chinese 5-year plan, and they'll be focused on advanced raw materials, speciality polymers, batteries. I mean, we've seen the influx of Chinese vehicles over the last just few years. Brands that we've not seen 5 years ago are now commonplace on the roads. Looking at green hydrogen, and again, putting in the investment necessary to scale all of these. So I think we'll see a huge amount of change through the course of this next 5 years, and then it will be probably the next 5-year plan, the 16th 5-year plan, where I think we'll see real competition coming from China on sustainability through its export market.
And as we come towards the end of the episode, for people working in sustainability roles today, what mindset do they need if they want to make a real impact rather than just manage reporting?
Yeah.
It's a big question. I mean, it's a very open-ended question, and maybe that's a whole other podcast topic, Chris. But in summary,
It possibly is, but I think focus on integration of sustainability into the business strategy. So think about risks and opportunities. Again, keep it really simple in terms of strategy development. What are the risks and opportunities for your customers, the end markets, and the products or services that you're looking to sell? If it's not in the strategy, it's not going to happen. And be able to articulate the value of sustainability. So how is that enabling some differentiation of your products or services, or how could that increase brand loyalty of your customers? But find the value, and then have the mindset about partnerships. You can't do any of this on your own. So it's really about understand your suppliers, understand your customers, understand the end markets, and look to build those relationships across the value chain, or be able to get other people to do it for you, like your procurement teams, like your innovation teams, like your commercial teams. So you've really got to have that mindset of being able to get others to build those partnerships for you going forward. Other than that, have thick skin, try and be pragmatic, and just keep focused on the positives. There's lots of reasons to be negative around sustainability, but think about where you want to be, where your company needs to be in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and what are the questions your customers are asking of themselves. Those are a few things just off the top of the head.
and what a great way to end the podcast. Now, a final question for you, Chris, something that I'm asking everyone on season 2. What's something that you've changed your mind about over the course of your career?
Two things, really. One, it's been about the role of others in the organisation. So the role of the CFO, I think I've fundamentally changed my mind about, because of a really great experience working with a CFO, how sustainability can bring value to the organisation. And then seeing that CFO really build that into how they were working across that organisation as well. So the role of the CFO is something I've gone from thinking, is it all just about sort of counting the beans, or where does innovation on sustainability come from if you're a CFO? And again, it's about being able to release capital, able to change the direction of an organisation, and in terms of investing. And then I guess I've changed my mind about myself and sustainability over the years. It's gone from, I guess, a bit of imposter syndrome. You think, why am I doing this? What actually is the value? And then slowly over the years, you realize the value in doing this. But in the early years, it was really difficult, and it was people doing this just because they think you have to. But then you start to change when you find those points of value. There was one meeting. It was the first meeting I had with the director in a particular role. He said, if you've not got anything useful to tell me, there's the door. And those were his opening words. It wasn't like I'd said something. It was those were his first words. So it was really changing my mind about sustainability almost as an ideology. It's got to be about delivering value and delivering outcomes for the business. So it very quickly changed my mind.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed it today.
Thanks, Natasha. Likewise.